Thank you all for joining this CRAcademy webinar, part of our CRAcademy or CRAcademy. I'm Pablo Endres from 7Shift, and I'm part of the CRAcademy Consortium. We are a consortium of 14 companies spread across four countries in Europe. And yeah, we're part of, this is a EU-funded project or co-funded project, part of the ECC, part of the digital stream. And we are, we're working on the CRA, trying to make it more accessible for different companies, especially for SMEs. And yes, we are working on the CRAcademy Wizard, which is a wizard that will be available that will help customers and help SMEs perform, guide them through the CRA assessment process in creating the dossier and running the tests that are necessary for CRA compliance. As part of the activities of our project, we have this dissemination, these dissemination activities. What you're joining today is the third of a series of webinars that Mikhail has prepared for us. If you missed parts 1 and 2, right, in the last 2 months, they are available on our website and on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to watch them on demand. You can share them with anybody who hasn't been able to join live. Yes, so this will be available. This is all available under our website, cracovy.eu. And yeah, with that, I think I will give the floor to Michael Beine, who will be our presenter for today, talking about the last part of this webinar series. So conformity assessment, the CE marking, and the vulnerability management under the CRA. Michael, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Michael Beine. I'm the business unit manager for cybersecurity services that we deliver in Germany at Bureau Veritas. I'm deeply involved in was deeply involved last year in the Radio Equipment Directive, which was a kind of a practice field for the Cyber Resilience Act. And now, this year, we see a steep incline and activities, a lot of activities for the Cyber Resilience Act. And as Pablo mentioned, one of those activities is to try to explain our understanding of the Cyber Resilience Act and share the view. And as Bureau Veritas, we see ourselves as a companion on the way to the compliance of the Cyber Resilience Act. If you have any questions during my presentation, please write them into the chat. Pablo will, after each section, will help me to bring up those your questions and answer them. If you have further questions, also feel free after the webinar to reach out to me, so that we can have a more detailed discussion of certain topics. I know there's a lot of detailed questions, and not all of them can be answered in this webinar format. So as Pablo mentioned, today we have 3 sections. First of all, the conformity assessment procedures. The second section will be a little bit a reminder of the rules of CE marking and how this is applicable for the Cyber Resilience Act. And finally, the very important topic of vulnerability handling and the most urgent topic of reporting obligation. But let me start with the conformity assessment procedure. One important term, let's say, to understand, which is not so obvious from the natural language, is presumption of conformity. What does this actually mean? And presumption of conformity is kind of bridging between the legal language, between the regulation itself and the technical standards on the other side. So by citing harmonized standards in the official journal, the EU Commission is conveying what they call the presumption of conformity. That means if a manufacturer meets the requirements of the standards, then if that standard has received the presumption of conformity citing, then this means that the manufacturer can be sure that he is meeting also the regulation. And that is the key statement by the EU Commission. And what is the benefit of this? The benefit of this and the result of this citing as a with presumption of conformity is that the manufacturer can benefit to use the standard for self-assessment in certain category of devices if he's fully applying this harmonized standard. So this is an intro into this conformity assessment procedures or concepts to understand what is the presumption of conformity. It's also important that not all standards have or will have the presumption of conformity. It provides also in some for the default products, for example, it provides additional legal certainty for using a certain standard. And then I dive into the different types of conformity assessment procedure. And this is clearly aligned along the different classification of devices. There's the huge, what we call the default class. The default class is any product with digital elements which does not fall into one of the higher marked classes like important class 1, important class 2, and critical. It's assumed that 80% of products with digital elements fall into the default class. And then in that default class, manufacturers have different choices to go through the conformity assessment procedure. First of all, there is a self-assessment possible. So in the default for products within the default class, self-assessment is possible, and the manufacturer can choose standards as he like. So it's full self-assessment under the responsibility of the manufacturer. If the product falls into the important class 1, then self-assessment is still possible. However, it needs a harmonized standard with presumption of conformity, and these harmonized standards need to be fully applied. If a product falls into the important class 1, the self-assessment is no longer possible. So in class 2, a third-party assessment is necessary. And one element of third-party assessment is what we call the EU type examination. This is typically, or this is executed by a notified body. So it involves the authorized third party, also known as notified body, to assess and verify the conformity. The notified body activity is also available in the default class, right? It's not only for important class 2, it is also available for other classes, however, not mandatory. In many cases, where Bureau Veritas is acting as a notified body, we see that manufacturers, because of that additional legal certainty, like the EU type examination certificate, even for default products, even if it is not mandatory, it creates the best possible proof of compliance that manufacturers can have for their products to go through a EU type examination procedure. Another topic, another way of doing it can be full quality assurance, and I'm going to dive into more detail what that is in relation to the EU type examination. And finally, if we look at critical products, the EU type examination and full quality assurance may be possible, but there might be delegated regulations in certain member states or all over Europe, which start to mandate certification. And the ENISA organization in Europe is asked to provide and define those certification schemes. The first scheme that has been nominated for CRA compliance is the Common Criteria Flavor, the EUCC scheme, that is nominated for this certifications of critical products. Open source software may need to go through conformity assessment procedures, but they have the full choice of all elements similar to the default class. Now let me dive into the different types of assessment procedure, how they look like and how they are defined. The self-assessment is also called the internal control. Or in other words, module A. So there's different terms for the same thing. Internal control, self-assessment, module A is all the same thing. I copy the extract from the legal language to explain what it is about. It is the procedure where the manufacturer demonstrates that he fulfills the obligations from the Cyber Resilience Act, especially the ones from Annex 1, Part 1 and Part 2, which define the detailed essential cybersecurity requirements in terms of process and product requirements, that they can show this and ensure this based on declaration on its own responsibility. So this is the self-assessment and declaration of conformity done by the manufacturer. He takes the full responsibility for the compliance, that he meets the compliance criteria. And by default, he has a full choice of using relevant standards to show this. However, assurance that this is a relevant standard can be enhanced by applying harmonized standards. And as I said, for important class 1, also the fully applying harmonized standard with presumption of conformity is the way to go to. The next level is the EU type examination. A third-party assessment, as I said, done by a notified body, or also called Module B. Here, the notified body takes on the responsibility that the Cyber Resilience Act requirements are met. And he does this by a examination, by assessment of the documents and proofs provided by the manufacturer. The notified body examines the technical design of the type. So not of every product, individual unit, but as a type examination for a certain type of product. And then the notified body will issue a certificate, EU type examination certificate. And this is strong proof for manufacturers to show and demonstrate that they comply to the regulation. Again, the notified body looks at the requirements from the part 1 of the end 2 of the Annex 1. So that means he will look into the essential cybersecurity requirements of products. Does the product meet the requirements, but also look into the process requirements. And this is a little bit different to RED. In Radio Equipment Directive, the notified body only looks at the product requirements or product properties. In CRA, the notified body also looks at the process-related requirements, and that to verify process-related requirements, periodic audits of the vulnerability handling process are defined and need to be implemented or need to be carried out by the notified body periodically to verify that that the vulnerability handling process is actually in place and is actively executed. We at Bureau Veritas are notified body for the Radio Equipment Directive and for many other regulations in Europe, and we will become notified body for the Cyber Resilience Act as well. At the moment, it is not yet possible to be nominated, but as soon as that window opens, we will do this and will become a notified body for the Cyber Resilience Act to support our customers with this, what I say, it's at the highest level of assurance of compliance to the regulation. Then I want to dive a little bit more into Module C, or what is internal production control. That goes quite closely with the Module B, the type examination. It is looking into the variants of products and can handle families of products. In Germany, we say Baugleichheitsbescheinigung. In English, it is like a similarity declaration. So where products have the same cybersecurity properties and one member of that family is already gone through a sort of conformity assessment, this procedure can handle the family of products which have the same cybersecurity baseline and the same cybersecurity requirements. This fits to the scenario where there is, let's say, differences in the analog space, for example. Cyber Resilience Act looks mainly into the digital space, but if a product of a variants have different color, different housing, different analog use cases, maybe a higher energy or power class and so on, without difference in the cybersecurity posture and requirements, then this can be interesting to be used. Again, this is a declaration by the manufacturer in its own responsibility. And then finally, we have the full quality assurance. This is Module H. This is a totally different to the B and C. In this case, the manufacturer demonstrates to the notified body that he has a full quality assurance program in place and active, which ensures that products manufactured under this assurance meet the requirements of the regulation. So the notified body will assess not the individual type of product, but will assess the quality management system that the manufacturer has in place. This also includes periodic reviews and examples of products that have run through this and allows the manufacturer to declare their products compliant to the CRA, even if they are in the higher critical classes. based on that quality assurance confirmation by the notified body. So this is one level up, let's say, in complexity and assurance, that not the product type is assessed by the notified body, but the quality management system of the manufacturer. To be honest, this is a scheme that is not so intensely being used. If we look at the Radio Equipment Directive, for example, we will see how attractive this is for manufacturers under the CRA. And then the last way of showing conformity is the certification scheme. And as I said, the ENISA has a task to approve cybersecurity certification schemes. They under the Cybersecurity Act. There's like 3 levels of basic, substantial, and high. And we saw in the table for the CRA, the expectation is that it's minimum a substantial level of assurance achieved through this certification scheme. And the only available certification scheme right now is the common criteria flavor, the EUCC, which is approved as a substantial and referenced for the CRA in the critical category. There is a revision currently being discussed for the Cybersecurity Act. So there will be a CSA 2 probably during next year released, which should boost a little bit the identification of certification schemes. I think the initial expectation was that there's multiple schemes to choose from. Right now we have only one. The revision of that Cybersecurity Act should boost this and provide more European cybersecurity certification schemes to support the CRA. We will see how this will move on. As usual, for each of my units, I prepare some questions to make these content a little bit more tangible and yes, for yourself to look if you could understand it. So self-assessment, the first question is, self-assessment can be used for products in the default class, open source software, or all of the above. Feel free to write your comments or your answers into the comments. And then after a few comments, I will resolve this and give the answer. As you may have seen or may have remember from the table, the self-assessment is available for default class and for open source software. So answer C is the correct one. Second question is about presumption of conformity. What is that? Is it A, it's based on harmonized standards? Is it B, it's the best guess of the manufacturer? Or is it C, all of the above? And I think that is also quite clear from my introductory slide. This is based on harmonized standards. The presumption of conformity is conveyed through the citing in the official journal of harmonized standards. And then the last question is more like an open question for you to consider. What is your assessment procedure that you target for your products? For me, it will be interesting to see what is the favorite assessment procedure if you drop this information to the chat. So thank you very much for your attention of the first unit. Maybe Pablo, did we have some questions in the chat?
I think the most relevant question is about the periodic audit cycle. Is this once a year, or how often? Well, what is implied by that? What is the periodicity that used there?
Yes, for this periodicity, there is not a clear definition yet in the legal language. So we need to wait a little bit for clarification, either through the guidance, which is published and worked on quite a bit from the expert groups. A draft version of that EU guidance is already published, but there was no statement regarding the periodicity. The next point where to find out about this will be the rules for the notified bodies. So I expect that this will be definitely defined there. I'm also joining with other notified bodies in an expert group in the TIC Council. So after this webinar, we will sit together and see what are the rules and then how can we harmonize the activities of notified bodies. And then we will get more information from this. At this time, the periodicity is not fixed. Okay, thank you for that question.
I have another question that just came in. This sounds interesting.
Okay.
I'll read it textually. We have a cloud solution that supports configuration of video cameras and heat pumps. Will it be required to comply with more than one harmonized standard? For example, ETSI 632, the EN 40101, and the other ETSI standards, so network management systems, or is it? Yeah, that's the main question. So basically, probably it will depend on which applies to where.
Yes. I'm expecting that manufacturers will choose multiple standards to show their full compliance to the CRA. CRA has the process requirements, has product requirements, and at the moment from the standardization, I don't see a single one standard that covers the whole thing. For class 1, class 2 vertical standards, this might be the case, but probably they will reference to different standards and will not create their whole framework. For example, vulnerability handling is probably not very different from the one to the other device type. So the examples that were in this question, there is probably not a big difference in how vulnerability management is done. So then the same standard can be used to show compliance to vulnerability management. Another aspect of choosing the right collection of standard is to really cover the whole, every aspect of the CRA and all the risks that come with that product. That if products fall into two categories, let's say, or cover two categories, then this might be necessary. I mean, the key or the core functionality of the device determines the categorization, but that does not determine the full risk scope. So something, a network interface, for example, has a certain risk, but a device incorporating a network interface may have a totally different risk portfolio. So the full risk portfolio need to be taken into account and may then ask for multiple standards to be used.
Okay, that's it for all. Thank you.
Yes, then I will continue with the next unit. A little bit a reminder of CE marking.
Just so you're aware, it's 11:33, so you have a little under 20 minutes for the next two modules.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I will go quickly through the CE marking, as this is not really CRA specific or cybersecurity topics. But during my talks to manufacturers, I see a lot of questions regarding CE marking. So I think it's worth including, but I will not dive too deep into this. So just as a reminder, CE mark brings a great freedom, but also comes with a great responsibility. It allows to place products on the EU market, which is a huge market access. it fully relies on a declaration of conformity, which is issued under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer. That is the responsibility for that freedom part. And then finally, products or the CE mark is a mark and should be placed on the products. That is not possible for all products. If you have a very small, tiny thing, it might not have the real estate to put a CE mark on. There's exceptions to this, but typically consumers or users of products can see with a CE mark that this is a CE mark product. They don't need to look up at the EU Declaration of Conformity. The EU Declaration of Conformity is this central piece more from the legal lawyer point of view. So lawyers will read the EU Declaration of Conformity and look at it from a more formalistic point of view. The EU Declaration of well, one thing here to explain is that CE is not an approval by an authority. So CE is a declaration of the manufacturer. And there is no registry of CE products because nobody is collecting this information overall. There's no mastermind or a single authority to do this. This is different to the US. In the US, there is the FCC, and if you have a radio product, your product will be listed in the registry of the FCC, and the FCC will issue a grant. This is not happening in Europe. In Europe, everybody can sell their products as long as they do this declaration of conformity, signing this. It comes with the responsibility, and there is a market surveillance to challenge and enforce the conformity. They have the tools of sanctions and fines. And in terms of CRA, these are quite drastic sanctions and fines. Like 2.5% I think, of the total global turnover revenue of the company. Right? So these are really drastic fines that, as a maximum, can be imposed to non-compliant manufacturers. Another sanction can be that products need to be taken off the market and can no longer be sold. That's also a drastic sanction that the market surveillance authorities have here. So this is high level how CE marking works and is done. I hear a lot of questions. So is our declaration of conformity good enough? Does it comply? So there's certain mandatory elements also defined in the CRA how a declaration of conformity needs to look like. Just to repeat, the name and address of the manufacturer needs to be clearly identified. Then the statement needs to be written that under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer, they declare to comply to certain regulations. And then you typically see a list of relevant union harmonization legislation or laws. And from December 27, this should include the CRA. And next to the CRA, we should see the referenced standards being listed. And that's why it's important to follow certain standards and recognize standards to put them on the declaration of conformity. And for sure, you need to the manufacturer needs to identify the product, so to allow traceability. So that if I see this paper, or if a user or somebody looks at this declaration, he can identify the product that he physically has in its hand. Typically, this goes by looking at the label of the product. So the name of the product as put on the label needs to meet and match with the product listed here in the declaration of conformity. If a notified body is used for the assessment procedure, then this needs to be noted and listed as well here on the declaration of conformity. Gives the declaration of conformity an additional level of assurance that this is correctly. And finally, it needs to be dated and signed with a former authorized person at the manufacturer, who puts then his, I think, own personal liability into this to declare conformity. So the new legislative framework is a legal framework around this CE marking. The blue guide is the go-to place if you want to understand better what it is and how it works. This explains not only for cybersecurity and CRA, but for different legislations, how products are placed on the market, what are the rules, what are the mechanisms, and so on, and what are the definitions, for example, placing on the market, making available on the market. These terms are clearly defined and explained here in the blue guide. What happens with the legacy products, what is with spare part and repairs. All these cases and corner cases are defined here or explained here in the blue guide. I really recommend to use this as a source of truth for these corner case questions, if products, and how to deal with certain products. Another view into CE marking is the different economic operators that are defined. Manufacturers who design, develop, and produce and maintain products with digital elements and place them on the EU market. Then there is the importers who take products from manufacturers from the outside of Europe and transport them into the EU market and place them on the market in the EU. And then there's distributors who take products who are already placed on the market in the EU, but then make them available to the users or to the consumers. In the center, we have those products with digital elements that need to comply to this. We have the users and consumers who use and operate those products with digital elements. If they are commercial users, additional legislation may apply to them. For example, NIS 2 can apply to operators of critical infrastructure. And if they use products with digital elements, there's a close relation between the NIS 2 and the CRA for this type of users. And then I mentioned already, there is the conformity assessment bodies. These are typically the test labs. For example, Bureau Veritas is such a test lab to execute the assessment, the conformity assessment based on the standards. This will be then handed to notified bodies as well. Other parts of Bureau Veritas are acting as notified body and can issue the EU type examination certificate. Market surveillance is governmental organizations in the member states to surveil the market and enforce the compliance to the CRA. C-certs are relevant entities, which I will explain later on, to receive those reports of actively exploited vulnerabilities. That is a specialty in the Cyber Resilience Act, not so much under the CE marking. And then for the notified bodies and for the conformity assessment bodies, there is accreditation bodies who confirm that these entities have the necessary competence and quality in their procedures to do their tasks. So, for example, at Bureau Veritas in Germany, we follow or have the DAX, German Accreditation Society, to assess our procedures, and we will have the BSI, the German Cybersecurity or Information Security Authority, to authorize as a notified body. Set here, move on a little bit. As I said, I don't want to dive too deep into this. What are these entities doing? Maybe we jump directly to the question section here. First question is, who issues a DOC, a declaration of conformity? Is it the user of the product? Is it issued by the market surveillance authority? Or is it the manufacturer at his own sole responsibility? Yeah, I see the answers coming in. And yes, I can confirm answer C is the correct one. An EU declaration of conformity is issued under the sole responsibility by the manufacturer. And then looking at CE certificates, who issues CE certificates? Is it A, nobody, because C is not a certificate? Is it B, the market surveillance authority who issues certificates? Or is it C, the notified body? Okay, so this is a little bit tricky question. First of all, yes, for sure, A is correct. There is no CE certificate. It's a declaration. However, there is this EU type examination certificate and issued by the authorized notified body, which is very close to this CE certificate. But it's not a CE certificate, it's a type examination certificate proving that the notified body has assessed this type of product for a certain regulation and certain standards. So the key message is there is no CE certificate. And then interesting question for me, again, as an open question to you is, have you ever been challenged by a market surveillance authority? And how quickly did they ask you to reply? So that points a little bit toward the preparedness of your conformity assessment. And it's interesting to know if this, if they let a lot of time to look into this, or if that is short times. Average duration that I hear is from a few days to, let's say, a dozen days, like 12 days, but typically not much longer. So that means you cannot start doing the compliance assessment or conformity assessments when the authority is knocking on the door and asking questions. Then you need to have these things in place to just hand over and say, well, this is what we have. This is a key message that I see from question 3. So Pablo, do we have questions from the audience?
We have, let me double check. Yes, we have the important question on the CE marking for intangible products sold online. Where should the manufacturer put the CE mark?
Yes, that is especially interesting for software, right? And that is where this CE marking expands to the current coverage. My expectation is that in the Play Store, the CE mark, or in the in the stores where the software, the apps can be downloaded, there is a place where CE mark can be placed. I think it can be also placed on the website for the download page or download site where users can obtain it. And another interesting place is the help about, where you see the version and so on of the product. It could also bear a CE mark there. But yes, it's an interesting question, and additional guidance is needed and will be issued by the EU to clarify further how these software type of products can have a CE mark affixed to them. Okay. Well, looking at the time, I think we are ready for the last part, the vulnerability handling and reporting obligation. So vulnerability handling is a mandate of the CRA. Manufacturers need to handle and document vulnerabilities of their products. Where do these vulnerabilities come from? They can come from the field. Right? Products are in the field, then vulnerabilities may be detected, reported to the manufacturer. Manufacturer need to put that into their database or a collection of vulnerabilities to their product. Reportings from the field may require a vulnerability disclosure policy, how manufacturers receive those reports. But this is not the only truth. The manufacturer cannot purely rely on this. They need manufacturers need to do a proactive approach of vulnerability scan, and maybe periodic pen testing can be a proactive approach to keep awareness in the manufacturer about vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities may be reported from the supplier of the components. Typically, products are not one piece. They come. They have components built together to the product. And then the supplier of those components has the obligation to inform users or the users of the component, and this might be an input to the manufacturer who uses these components. So these are the input streams. Then there is the evaluate, score, and mitigate activity. This to, let's say, track to closure vulnerabilities, and this may lead to a drop. So it's not mandatory to fix everything if there is no risk with a certain vulnerability or acceptable risk. Then with such a justification, vulnerabilities may exist in products. So the CRA says free of known exploitable vulnerabilities. And if there is a justification that a certain vulnerability is not exploitable for the product, then it can stay within the product. So the mandate is not free of any vulnerability, because that is never be able to achieve. But this proactive approach needs to be in place, and there needs to be an active vulnerability handling for the products, and do this loop of tracking to closure. And then the output can be fixed by update of the product, can be informing the user, the customers, by advisories, and it can be the necessity to report them to government for situational awareness. And this is the reporting obligation, which I will come in a bit. So vulnerability handling obligations, as they are written into the CRA legal language. Manufacturers has to actively manage any kind of vulnerability and assess the risk for their product. So there is no excuse about this is not a relevant vulnerability. No, at the beginning, you need to look at everything that can be a vulnerability, and then assess the risk. Then the next obligation is the manufacturer has to identify and track to closure known exploitable vulnerabilities before releasing the product to the market. That is the next level. And then there's a third category of vulnerabilities. As soon as the manufacturer has knowledge about an actively exploited vulnerabilities, so that is more like a incident. Also, it's mentioned here as a severe incident. Then this triggers the reporting obligations, or is a key element of the reporting obligations defined in Article 14. Manufacturers have to report this events or this information to the ENISA, on the European level, but also on the national CCERT authorities. In Germany, it's a BSI. In other countries, it will be different organizations, but on national level. And this is an important obligation, and is triggered already in September this year. So this is not so far out. This obligation needs to be come up with, or manufacturers need to comply with this obligation by September this year. And what makes it more critical, or also very interesting, let's say, is that this applies to product already placed on the market. So whenever somebody reports an actively exploited vulnerability and claims that he has purchased a product from the manufacturer ABC, then manufacturer ABC has the responsibility to react on this report, see if that is a true claim or if that is just, let's say, a user impression and error. I don't know. There can be a triage in this process. But when this is exploited vulnerability, also in a very old product, this needs to be reported. So this is active before the deadline of product compliance. This is a obligation of manufacturers as they live, let's say, or as they are active in the market. A very important topic here about known exploitable vulnerabilities. How do we know that something is a known vulnerability? There is the EU vulnerability database. This is the place to go to see if a vulnerability is known. As soon as it appears here, it's difficult to claim that this was an unknown vulnerability, is a zero-day exploit. No, if this appears here, it is known. And the good thing about this database is it also has a classification in exploitability. So it has exploitability rating, and this can be used as a threshold to manage vulnerabilities as known vulnerabilities. There's a lot of input streams to this. There is interfaces and automation workflows. So this is the go-to place if you want to know about vulnerabilities, if they are known and if they are exploitable. This is not the single reporting platform for the reporting obligation. So this is very similar to the CVE or NVD database hosted in the US by Mitre. Actually, all the CVEs go into the EUVD as well. So there's a full copy of that database here. So this is the EU vulnerability database. And then looking at the reporting obligation, there is a single reporting platform being established at the moment, and the reports of actively exploited vulnerabilities or significant incidents, they go into this, need to be reported to this reporting platform. So this is a diagram how this reporting obligation works. The input stream are these two, yes, let's say incidents or activities. There is a triage possible or expected where a manufacturer decides, okay, now we are aware that this is a actively exploited vulnerability. As soon as a manufacturer becomes aware of this triggers very short timers. Within 24 hours, an early warning needs to be submitted to this reporting platform. Within 27 hours, a detailed report needs to be given to the reporting platform. And then depending on if it is a vulnerability or incident, there is 14 days or 1 month time to come up with a final report. All this needs to be fed by the manufacturer into this reporting platform. And who is reading this? This goes to EU, on EU level to ENISA, and this goes to the national CSRTs where this report has been filed for their situational awareness. However, they cannot just sit on this and ignore it if they get to know certain vulnerabilities. There is also a disclosure necessary. And within these reports, the disclosure strategy needs to be informed to these organizations so that it can be handled in a responsible way. Disclosing vulnerabilities is a tricky and critical item. It needs to align with the situation. It should not point attackers to existing vulnerabilities and help them. If they just read those reports, then they know where to attack, right? So this needs to be avoided when doing this publication of vulnerabilities. On the other side, it's very valuable to know about vulnerabilities when you design a product and when you decide for certain components, if there are vulnerabilities and if they are fixed. So transparency and vulnerability has these two sides of the medal. And then as we reach the end of the hour, I will not go into detail about all these definitions of terms. I will directly go to the question section. So these are my questions. Later on, you can, I will also look into your questions. First of all, question 1, what must be reported? Any vulnerability, A, or B, publicly known vulnerabilities, or C, actively exploited vulnerabilities? So this again is a little bit a trick question. Clearly, it's not any vulnerability, right? The publicly known vulnerabilities typically go into the CV database, a CVE database, or the EU vulnerability database, where the actively exploited vulnerabilities, they fall under this reporting obligation, and they need to be reported into the single reporting platform. So depending on the direction, B and C can be true for reporting. Where to report those? A, ENISA and national CSIRTs, B, CVE database, or B, CVE database, or C, EUVD. Yeah, I think with my explanation on question 1, I've also answered to this question. The reporting obligations go to ENISA national CSIRTs, and CVE and EUVD are closely connected, so it doesn't really matter where to report this. And then a very interesting question: what is the difference between exploitable and exploited? I think this is a key term and very narrow. If you look at natural language, these are very close to each other, these terms, but they mean totally different things. An exploitable vulnerability is, let's say, also a potential vulnerability, but nobody yet found the motivation to do it. But an actively exploited vulnerability is an incident where an attacker had the motivation and succeeded to exploit it. That is the key difference. The exploitable vulnerabilities prevent from placing on the market. The actively exploited vulnerabilities mandate for reporting in this single reporting platform. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm now open to the questions from the audience.
So we have no questions coming in at this time, but I do think it makes it may be interesting to stay a little bit on this question 3. So something that is exploited, would something that has a existing POC, a proof of concept code, be considered exploited or exploitable? So someone already proved you can break it, but there is not necessarily a campaign actively doing it. What would be the under which category would this land into?
I've seen this question also being raised to the EU Commission to get further clarity. I I think if we look at all the guidance and everything that is available right now, there is not yet a clear differentiation with legal certainty available for this. So clarification from the EU guidance is necessary and need to be placed precisely on this difference.
Okay, then we will wait and see what the official response is.
Yes. Okay, then thank you very much, everybody, for joining this webinar series. I hope it was useful for you. I could bring this towards the audience in an understandable way and highlight the topics of the Cyber Resilience Act. As I said, I am open also to individual talks offline to the webinar where the webinar format is not suited for this. Reach out to me. You have the contact information in the slides. And yeah, looking forward to see you in future webinars, which will definitely happen because the Cyber Resilience Act is a dynamic field and a lot of new information appears all the time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you everybody for joining. Just a quick reminder, if you missed the previous series, you can find them on the CRAcademy website. This one will also be published, so if you have friends and colleagues that also wanted to attend and could not make it due to time responsibilities, this will be published probably by the end of the week on the CRAcademy website. So yeah, thank you for joining and I hope to see you in the next webinars. Have a great day.
Have a good day. Bye.